Hello, my name is Kelly Thomason, and this is my testimony to the Lord Jesus Christ. So, even from a young age, I'd been raised Christian, but our definition of Christian didn't really look like much. I mean, we pretty much went to church on Sunday and said our prayers at night, read the Bible sometimes, and went to Bible class. And I figured that's all there was. I kind of always knew God existed and I knew about Jesus, but I don't think I ever fully understood back then. So, flash forward from high school, and I've gone to college. I had a job that would use my degree, but through a series of misfortunes, I wasn't able to continue working at that job. And I realized that this job field is really not for me. I know, great to figure this out after I have the degree. Um, then I ultimately made the decision to stay at my minimum wage retail job and work something else out, basically. And for a time, it was okay. But after a couple of years, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to stay at that job anymore. It didn't pay enough. I was bored. There was a lot of other frustrating factors to this job. And so I started researching on the internet how to make money online. I was trying to find a different job, or I was figuring out what skills I have that I could maybe start my own business. And I tried that for a few months or so, and I was still really optimistic, but I started to get angry. Now, when I say that I tried this for a while, I mean I tried the online work, my own business for maybe almost 3 years. I'd been working at it and being optimistic, trying different jobs, things I figured out, and none of it was working. And so I started to get really angry. I started to get really frustrated, feeling the pressure of time on my back, and I never felt like I had enough time to do anything. Working all day drained me. And then when I got home, I just really didn't have the energy to function, or nighttime was the only time I really had, and I was desperately trying to get out of my garbage job. I wanted out of it so bad, and I kept saying what I thought was a prayer to God. Why can't you let me out of this job? I'm better than this place. I'm better than all these people. I'm so much smarter. I have all of these skills. You can see where this is going. And so I kept saying, these kind of quote unquote prayers, like I was trying to bargain with God or something, but it really wasn't getting anywhere because I flat out was demanding, this is what needs to happen. And I figured God wasn't listening to me. I figured he hated me, or he didn't care about my circumstances, and that when I was younger in church, we always had this little saying about God, that God helps people who help themselves, but of course that's wrong, as I've come to find out. And, but we'll come back to that. So another year or so goes by. I'm still trapped at this job. I hate coworkers that are hateful, apathetic to me. The customers couldn't even be more rude and demanding. I was accumulating so much debt, and it was weighing on me and my husband, and there was no way I could quit. And unfortunately, our neck of the woods, there's not a lot of choices for work, and I was so angry and fed up at this point that I started to turn it outward. I was angry at everybody. I was angry at everything. Everything was a waste of time. I just felt like I've got to get this done so that I can make a lot of money so I don't have to work here anymore. I'm not proud of this. I was really hateful to people. Um, I I guess it just started to weigh on me. I felt like I was a punching bag for everybody else, and that I was so much better than this job, but I just couldn't seem to get myself out of the hole. And I figured either God hated me, or he had forgotten about me, or I was just doomed to stay where I was, essentially miserable. And so, since my behavior was boiling over into all aspects of my life, I started to isolate myself. And then I was just working constantly on this side job. Every spare second I was home, it like became a very unhealthy obsession. And it was a lie I kept repeating to myself, that I'll ignore the people in my life right now, and then I get to enjoy them later when I have a lot of money and I have more time. That was the lie and the repeated cycle that I put myself into. I overworked myself so much that I was constantly stressed, and started to have like digestive issues and that sort of thing, and self-medicating with caffeine to try and keep putting in the hours. And then we became into the height of the pandemic at this point. There was so much going on for me personally. I had a massive fear of losing our jobs. Even though I hated the job, I still needed the money, obviously. And at this point, I didn't really have anybody to turn to anymore. I was depressed and angry and just tired all the time. And every day, the news brought more and more fear and stress. And so I just figured, well, this might be it. I wasted my whole life at a retail store, accomplishing nothing. Online work failed, creating my own businesses failed, our financial burden was so great. And I could go on, but you get the point. Everything, I was at my lowest point. I was in the pit of destruction. There were many days I was so beaten down that I cried on my drive home, that I didn't see the point in life anymore. I just wanted it to be over. I just wanted everything to be over. I know it's hard for people to hear this, but I didn't want to live anymore, but I was just too afraid to do anything about it. And I didn't feel like I had anybody I could talk to, or anybody that I could turn to. And because doctors have let me down in the past too. So I just really didn't have any trust in people or anything. And I just felt like, well, I'm strong, I'll get through this, and I'm just frustrated and upset right now because I just don't like where I'm working, and that I'll get through it, and then when I'm in a better situation, I'll feel better, and then I won't be so sad, right? So, but then more like a stupid loop of thoughts started coming into my head. It was just like all the time I was hearing, it's pointless. I'm worthless. I should just finish the job so I can rest, and then the pain will all be over with. And it was just, I feel like the buildup of the chronic stress had finally caught up to my body. I wasn't sleeping. I was working all the time, and I was worried about the state of the world. I had forced myself past the breaking point and spent the last 3 years being hateful to others and cursing God above it all, because, he could have given me everything I asked for. It wasn't that big of a deal. He could do anything. But the truth is, I was a terrible human being. And I was so desperate for anything to work out. I felt bad every day, and I had no idea my liver was actually failing me. And it was causing other health issues. I just figured I was burned out, and that this was just because I had worked myself too hard. another reason why I didn't go to the doctor, because I basically had talked myself into, like, I didn't want the giant medical bill because we had already had a giant hospital medical bill from a few years ago, and they couldn't figure out anything wrong with me then because I had complained about being tired that long ago. But it wasn't as bad as it was now in this moment that I'm talking about. It was straight up. I felt like I was near death because I was just so sick and so tired. And I don't know where I got the strength from, but I basically, as I was crying, I went into the other room and I finally said to God, I can't do this anymore. I need your help. Even though pretty much everything I'd ever said to God up until this point had been, why aren't you helping me? I deserve these things, just demands and accusations, and I can't believe you're not helping me. Just all these terrible things, right? And I finally broke down and said, I need your help. I was like, I felt it in my heart. I said, I don't want to be a lukewarm Christian anymore. I want to make a full commitment. And then at that moment, I felt the strongest, like, positive, like a radiant, it was like a comet crashed through me. And I realized in that moment, oh, this is God. This is God the Father. His hand went straight through me. It was like it knocked all of the negative force and energy that was around me out of me. All the despair, guilt, shame, anxiety that I had been carrying around for all those years pushed straight through me into the floor. It felt almost empty for a minute because that is how I'd been living for 3 or 4 years now at this point. It's just the constant internal monologue of you're worthless, you're stupid, you'll never amount to anything, that you'll never get out of this job, you'll never this, that, anything you could think of. I was living with it. It was gone. It was suddenly gone. And a subtle warmth came over me. And then I heard a very quiet but strong voice say to me, how can I help you? And at the time, I thought it was Jesus that had come to me because that was what I'd always remembered. But then I realized that this was, in fact, the Holy Spirit of God, and it's the helper that's promised to true believers in the New Testament, the verse John 14:26. And it was strange for that moment because I thought, what is happening? And I knew it wasn't coming from me because everything I ever think or had been thinking was negative or putting myself down or putting other people down. I never, just kind of shook me up. I couldn't believe it. After all the things I'd said and all the negative energy I'd been just releasing, the God of the universe came to me at my lowest point in my life, asking me how he could help me. Even after I said such rotten, terrible things to all my brothers and sisters in the world and to him. That's the God that rules this earth, that rules this universe. So, it was weird, but I decided to kind of mentally ask. I said, well, what about my job? Can I change jobs? Because I didn't mention it earlier, but that was another thing. I felt like, well, maybe I'm supposed to be at this job because, I just, anxiety. Anxiety just makes you like question everything. But basically I was just like, well, what can I do? Because some tiny part of me was like, does God want me to stay at a tiny part of me was like, does God want me to stay at this job? Is like, am I like letting people down? Anxiety's weird. All right, everybody. So he told me that it was okay if I wanted to make a change, and it was okay for me to try and get a different job, but it was going to take some time. And he told me that I was very sick and that I needed to recover first. And I remember thinking, wow. And even though I was still reluctant at this point, I mean, I knew something had to change. And if God's telling you to go to the doctor, I just had to trust that I was going to figure out where to go. And so I went to the doctor, and that's when they discovered that my liver was failing, and then I would need various treatments so that I could recover. And it basically was causing like a multi-organ type of failure, and was causing like an autoimmune reaction in my body. So it was kind of like the liver wasn't working right, so then like everything else in me wasn't working right, and it was making a host of problems for me. So I had to take a lot of medicines and different like treatments, and I had to change my diet, and I had to do like a lot of things so that I could try and get back to normal again. And I mean, I thought that was the end of my near-death experience because when they looked at, I mean, it just, like I knew, I was like on the border. I was on the borderline. I didn't die, but I was really close. And if I would not have gone to the doctor, I probably would have ended up hospitalized for a while. And then that would have been bad. So, but in the coming days, I found that even the devil had a bone to pick with me. So for the next few weeks, I was like in this spiritually healing atmosphere with God, because I would pray almost every day, and I was just so sorry. I couldn't believe that I thought all these horrible things, and I was so misguided. And I prayed, and I had tears of sadness and happiness, and I had so much sadness because I wasted so much time chasing the illusion of like fame and money. It's kind of like the road of destruction is paved with good intentions, because that was how I convinced myself I needed to do all these things, was because I wanted to do it for my family. But then it became twisted. And I was so sad that I missed out on relationship time with my family over this empty promise. And I just thought about, anyway, all the people that I was mean to, and all the people that I missed out on having like a friendship with, because I was so caught in my own head. I was prideful. That was probably my main sin, was pride. And so I had so much joy, though, because I had been given a second chance. God did love me. He hadn't forgotten me. And he showed me, like, little by little, why things in my life had worked out the way they did. He showed me things from, like, a lot of things from my childhood, or, like, when I was a teenager. And many moments that people would find, like, insignificant in their life, but they, like, all held a purpose in the grander scheme of God's plan for my life, which I just found fascinating, because he really, like, showed me, like, some of these moments where I'd made choices or things that happened, and I just thought, oh, okay, that, and then it made sense, because then I started to think about things that are in, after that, and in like a few years down the road, 20 years, 10 years down the road, and I go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like I can't explain, because we'd be here all day, but you get what I'm saying. And it would just take forever, but basically God was with me the whole time, even when I was upset with him, even when I was frustrated with him. He was there. He was just patiently waiting. And because because he's faithful even when we're not. And I also had some more conversations with Jesus, and he showed me a lot of other things that were going on in my life that I shouldn't be doing, things I didn't think were a big deal, and that the world often tells us are like, it's fine. But I would implore you all to like look at the things in your life and examine everything, and examine it harder if the world tries to downplay the significance of. So while I was recovering, I kept shifting back and forth between recovering and kind of relapsing a little, and then every time I relapsed, I felt kind of like a stronger. So it was like I was between the veil of life and death. I was walking around in a haze most days, and oftentimes I could hear like those hateful voices. It seemed like they had come back, and um, they sounded different this time, because before, when I had these like hateful words towards myself, they sounded like they were coming from my conscious, and I just have always had a harsh internal monologue with myself even since I was a kid. But now that I had the Holy Spirit living inside me, I was able to hear like the voices, and they sounded different. It was demons that had been tormenting me this whole time, and it's what they do to pretty much everybody on the earth at some point or another. If you have any of that negative internal talking, sometimes it might be another force that's influencing you. And so, because I had had such terrible behavior to everyone else, I had basically invited them in, and then they had used that opportunity to like feed me lies here and there. And it's because they don't want the world to know how much God loves us or that Jesus died for us. They want to keep us perpetually separated from our Creator. And so that's where a lot of those lies came from, like God doesn't love you, God hates you, you've been forgotten, you're worthless, you might as well die, there's no point to your life. And that's not true. Everyone has a purpose, and everyone's here because God came up with a plan for them, and He wants us to live a full life through His Son's sacrifice. And so, but at the time, I didn't think about it too hard, because, I'd like almost died, and I was coming down from all the stress, and so I just figured, I'm still just trying to recover. My hormones are out of balance, that sort of thing. And because, it's important to note here that I hadn't read the Bible or been to church since like high school time. And so I had pretty much forgotten everything I'd ever read, really. I didn't fully understand that there was still like a spiritual war going on around me. Because I am going to be 34, and I was in high school, maybe 17, 18 is probably the last time I remember really going to church or reading the Bible. And even back then, it was like, okay, this is a book, And so I was at work for a few weeks after my first encounter with God, and I was like putting away clothes like I usually do, and then this overwhelming like hateful presence just kind of came up behind me, and it was stronger than any of the other negative forces that had been around me before. And I felt like I couldn't move. I could only kind of like tremble. And then like the loudest, like the most booming voice I'd ever heard, it was like roaring like a hungry beast. It was roaring like a beast hungry for a meal. The strongest conviction I'd ever felt like in my life. And it said, "You're lying. You're a liar. And that is against God. You can go to hell for that." Which is true. You shouldn't lie. But, we're all liars. So, and we all fall short. But then it took me a second, and I realized why I was being accused. And there was an event that had happened between me and my sister. There were lies between us that had caused a schism. And so my sister and I weren't on the best of terms because we'd been like lying to each other about things, and then we would like catch each other in these lies, and then we just kind of decided to bury it because we just couldn't resolve our differences at the time. But now there was this being that was yelling at me about something that happened almost 6 months ago, which I realized was the devil, because I looked it up later in the Bible, and he is often referred to as the accuser. And this is the main way that the devil gets people to doubt God exists or doubt his character, and to focus on the things we've done and focus on the past that can't be changed. And, it's impossible for us to be good enough for God. And that's why Jesus came to pay the price for us. So no sooner had I been accused and I found myself feeling like I don't want to bring that up again, I heard this quiet, authoritative voice beside me, and it was Jesus. He was right there next to me saying, "Do you trust me?" And I was just like, yeah, I want to, but I just don't want to talk to my sister about all that stuff that happened with us. And he said, well, if you trust me, then write this down. So all the while, the devil is making a commentary and trying to dissuade me from bringing it up, while also criticizing me that it's lying and I can never be right. And I'm trying to focus on typing this into my phone and writing what Jesus wants me to say to my sister. And so after a minute, I've got what I'm trying to say in the phone, and then I told her that we need to talk in person and that we should meet later. And in the strong presence of the devil, he started to fade, but not without a few more cursing roars at me. And I started to walk towards another location at my work, and I'm like shaking and I'm kind of overwhelmed. I was like bombarded with thoughts of like, am I with God? Am I not? And like what was like, I can't believe this. And I can only assume, this is my assumption, that because of my behavior and because I had invited all those other demons in without knowing it, that the devil still was trying to, say he had a claim to me. He had a claim to my life. But obviously I'd already given my life over to Jesus. And so he, and then Jesus I kind of felt his hand on my shoulder, and he said very firmly, "You're mine." And it was basically like confirming to me, like he was confirming to me that, I'm saved, everything's going to be okay. And in the Bible, 1 Peter 5:8 talks about that the devil is roaring. In the Bible, 1 Peter 5:8 talks about the devil roaring like a lion, prowling about, searching for whom he may devour. And I guess I was on the plate, So I was very afraid to talk to my sister about the things that had happened between us. And even though I was afraid in the moment and I didn't know what was going to happen, it really opened the door and revealed some things about my sister and I's relationship that needed to mend. And this conversation started out rough, as you might suppose. And but me bringing this up mended so many other things. It just kind of cleared the air, and I reconciled with my sister. And then I felt Jesus saying again that sin has been forgiven and don't talk about it anymore. And I understood he meant like, I don't need to bring up the past issue with her anymore, and I don't need to talk to anybody else about what has happened except for in this testimony, so that people understand how much I've been forgiven and how gracious our Lord is to us. And he forgives us so many things, and that's why it's so important that we forgive each other. And I know it's really hard in the moment when we're upset with people or they've hurt us. I'm not saying you have to like immediately forgive them like 5 seconds after, but you have to really stop and reflect and try and work through things with people. And it's hard, but that was my experience too. Um, so just when I started to settle into a new routine, I got to experience one more close encounter with God, and it was probably another few weeks after this, and I was at work again. And see, that's the ironic thing, is usually at work I'm interrupted like every second, and like there's always somebody or something that needs my attention. But for whatever reason, this day I was opening boxes of clothes by myself. I felt this warm giant presence come over me again, and this time it was God the Father. It was fully positive energy, and it was just bright. It felt like it was brighter around me, you know. And then he greeted me, but it wasn't words. See, that was what was interesting about it. It was just kind of like his presence. I knew who this was. And then he started to like directly imprint on my heart the life mission he had laid out before me. And it was a strange sensation to me, because he told me some more things that made sense, because they were things I had dreamed about since I was a kid. And then he also told me some other things that I needed to do that I never would have thought of doing in like 100 years. And the most interesting, it's like no words, there's no need for talking. It would be like pause for a moment, and then it was like I would instantly understand what I was supposed to know. And I know that God had to have been there to imprint all of these things on me that day, because anytime I try and like doubt or question that what happened that day, it's like I have a visceral reaction. It's almost like somebody is trying to tell me the sky is green and I know it's blue. So I thought I should mention that in a way I have been praying my whole life to know what to do with my life. I always wanted to know like what career, or I'd always find something that I felt like I could do that, but nothing like ever felt 100% right. I just accepted that and felt like, well, I can do what I want on the side. But as God revealed to me in this conversation, he had already had everything planned out for me, and like he plans for everybody. Like everyone has free will, but no matter what way you go, he uses it to shape us and mold us for his purpose and the greater plan for our lives. But you know, like when we're formed, he's already given us like likes and dislikes, and so he doesn't like form a plan for somebody who won't like the final result. Like the job he's crafted for me is perfect and exactly what I dreamed of as a child, and I know that he wants it for you too, but it just might be a struggle to get where you really need to be. And some of you might be like annoyed with that thought, so I'm going to explain a little bit more. Because like I've always dreamed about being like a teacher and writing books for a living, but like my life always seemed to end up in the service industry, like food and retail. And then my career job, I was like an animal nurse, which is totally the other complete way, you know, because I thought I was going to be an artist, and here we are. But as I went through all those roles, they like shaped me into a more capable person. I mean, I made the choices and they helped me grow, and there was no guarantee I'd ever find this potential if I hadn't reached out to God, because so many people go through their lives and they miss out on what's more. His plan for me has always been for me to be a teacher, and not just so that was like the believable part to me. But then he made it another step further, because with God, it's never just like it's going to be this like really simple, small idea like you're going to be a teacher. It's more you're going to be a teacher and open a school. So, which is something I never would have thought on my own, That thought has never crossed my mind. Sure, I wanted to be a teacher, but I never was like, I'm going to open a school. And so I don't know where else I would have gotten that idea. Seriously. And he wants me to be an author, which is something I thought of before by myself. And he just wants me to be someone who can educate others for Christ's kingdom. And he's given me all the tools and the talent to carry that out in multiple different ways. And that's why I say, like, there's no like mistakes in his design, and all that, and I can just look at my choices and look at the things that I'm able to do, and it lines up just so perfectly. It blows my mind sometimes. So another example of how a choice in my life was like nudged in another direction is when I was in college. Like, I was in a college to, I hadn't decided my major yet, but at that time I had the thought, maybe this is when I'll go for teaching, because I know I'm kind of a little spoiled. The first time I went to college, I went to art school, and then I realized that's not going to work. Guess what? I don't want to have to move. I don't want to have to go anywhere, whatever. Plus, I couldn't deal with criticism. I couldn't stand if the teachers like criticized, but I know I was a little bit of a snowflake when I was younger. So I just felt like, well, I need to have something more stable and direct. And I thought for a minute, teacher. But for whatever reason, my parents wouldn't let me pursue that at that time. And God kind of explained that he knew I would listen to my parents. And so when I went to school for a different career, it was like God's way of kind of like nudging me down a different path so that I could learn other character traits that I needed so that I could actually succeed when the time was right for me to be a teacher. Because if I would have went straight into being a teacher at that time, I would have failed right away. Back then, my personality was a mix of being impulsive and not having patience for others, and just unorganized, just not having very teacher-like qualities. Just think of the stereotypical teacher qualities. I didn't have any of them, right? But being in the service industry for most of my life has prepared and conditioned me to have patience and like the fortitude to like carry through with what I start. And I could go over so many things that were brought back to my memory, but like I said, we'll be here all day. The general thing I want you to really take away from this is that even if you can't see all the purposes or points in everything that's happened in your life, I can guarantee you that God has found some purpose or some way to work that into shaping and forming your character, because that's the thing we're going to take with us is our character. Can't take your money, can't take your stuff. All we have left is how we treated other people and who we are as people in the face of challenges. So to me, I can't emphasize enough. This was like the biggest prayer that I had been speaking for so long. It was literally the prayer of my life had been answered in such a grand way. And I just appreciated it so much. I cried about it. I was just so happy, and it just confirmed to me how much he like cares about me and his whole creation. We're his children, and he doesn't just drop us down here willy-nilly and like hope we figure it out. He's always with us, even when we feel like he's not. He's just waiting for us to say we need help, to say we want him to be involved directly. And I've been walking with the Lord for a year now, and I stay close as I can, but I still stumble just like everybody. I still backslide sometimes, but it's different. Everything's different. I'm not going to say he makes everything easy, because obviously there's a lot of challenges to being a Christian. And I've had to confront people in my life or things from my past that weren't pleasant, and it was hard. And so I don't want to mislead anybody, because he's made a lot of things better. But there's, like I said, there's been challenges. And I have always felt so much relief after countering any of these things, and then just knowing that God's been with me, even when I was angry with him, even when I hated him or I felt like he hated me. I can't imagine, because, as human beings, we're so quick to cut people out of our lives or throw people to the curb if they don't meet our expectation. But God's not like that at all. And we hurt each other. And I know it sounds like it's a hard thing to believe. Like, how can there be a person who cares about us so unconditionally? But he is true to his word, the Bible, and he's faithful. I should have said it earlier in the video, but I feel like it makes the most sense right now. I was going to hell. I thought I believed in Jesus and God, and I did, but I hadn't been born again, which is what the Bible talks about, that you have to fully commit, fully give your life over, or else you're going to hell. I know it's a hard thing for people to understand, but if you think the world is bad now, just imagine that times a million forever, and constantly burning every negative feeling, emotion, torture, constant torture forever. And that's really hard for humanity to understand. Forever, it's such a foreign concept to us. But it's the truth. And I was about to be one of them. And God saved me when he had no reason to. And that's why we call it grace, because he's the one who makes the decision. And then we have to agree with God. And give up. Because I was very stubborn. I was very prideful. I thought I could do everything by myself. And I didn't want to give up the control. And because I thought if I had control, I can't fail. I can't lose. But obviously from my story, that's not true. That the only reason I'm succeeding now, and I'm going to continue to succeed, is because I've formed a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I don't intend on letting go of that anytime soon. Jobs will let you down. People will let you down. But God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit, which is God's Spirit, they won't let you down. He's thought of every detail of our lives, and he loves us so much, it's unreal. I have been completely made new. My mindset about everything has completely flipped. I wanted to speak specifically to anybody who's in the service industry, because I work in retail. And trust me, I understand it's so hard. It's so emotionally and physically and mentally draining to work in the service industry. People will drain you. People are rude and hateful and mean. The work can hurt your body physically. But I realized going through all of this that it was such a privilege, that I know it's going to sound crazy to some people, but it has been a privilege to serve all these people in my community, because Jesus served us all first. And when I put it through that lens of context, it humbled me so much, because it says in the Bible that no servant will be above his master. And, because Jesus is our master. And he went through all of these trials. He didn't have to come to earth and put himself in a human body. He didn't have to do any of the things he wanted to do. If he didn't love us when we fell in the garden, he could have just wiped us out and started over with something else or did something different. But he didn't give up on us then, and he won't give up on you now if you commit to him and you give your life to him. And so I wanted to get back to, I started thinking about, we, take care of a lot of older people at our retail store. And, maybe that's the only interaction that they get all day, that they get to talk to a worker for a few minutes. And And if that one interaction with you is hateful and terrible, just like think of how much you've brought them down. So I try to be that person that others helps others find what they need. I try to help everyone to the best of my ability, even when they're being hateful to me. But and ever since I had my mental shift, it's been great because now I get the compliment, "Oh, you're always so nice. You're so kind." And I get that compliment all the time. And I never used to get that before because I didn't think about it. I always just thought, well, I'm helpful enough to these people and like I'm nice enough because they're like kind of being rude to me, so I'm kind of rude back.